I drive a school bus for the Columbus City Schools District, and I have done it for going on 31 years. That is not a glamorous thing to say at a dinner party. I know that. My son-in-law made sure I knew that too. His name is Philip. He married my daughter Autumn 6 years ago in a ceremony at a vineyard outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, that cost more money than my first house. I wore the suit I bought for my brother's funeral in 2009. It still fit. Autumn said I looked handsome. Philip's mother looked at me like I had walked in off the street asking for directions. I noticed, but I let it go. That is something you learn when you drive a bus full of kids every morning for 3 decades. You learn to let things go. You learn that most people are carrying something heavy, and sometimes that weight comes out sideways, aimed at whoever is standing nearest. I have been the nearest person more times than I can count. Philip is a financial analyst at a firm downtown. He wears shoes that cost more than my monthly car payment. He talks about the market the way some men talk about football, with this urgent passion that assumes everyone in the room cares just as much as he does. I do not follow the market. I follow my route. I know every pothole on Morse Road. I know which kids need an extra minute to get down the steps because their backpacks are too heavy. I know which ones are having a hard morning just from the way they walk to the bus. Philip does not think that amounts to much. He has never said it in those exact words. But I have been reading people my whole life, and a man does not need to say a thing out loud for you to understand him perfectly. Autumn knows who her father is. She grew up watching me leave the house at 5:15 every morning, thermos in one hand, route sheet in the other. She watched her mother pack my lunch and kiss me goodbye in the dark. She watched her scrimp and save and stretch $1 until it hollered. And she turned out just fine. Better than fine. She is a pediatric nurse. She takes care of other people's children for a living. I could not be more proud of her if I tried. But somewhere between that girl who used to run to meet me at the end of the driveway when I got home, and the woman who now hosts dinner parties with cloth napkins and wine that comes in bottles with corks, something got complicated. I want to be careful here. I am not blaming my daughter. I am not. But I will say this. When you marry someone who looks at the world the way Philip does, some of that starts to rub off whether you notice it or not. My wife Lorraine passed away 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. We had 38 years together, and I will tell you plainly, I have not figured out how to be in the world without her. I live alone in the same house we bought in 1991, on a quiet street in Westerville, Ohio. I keep the gutters clean. I mow on Saturdays. I still sleep on my side of the bed. After Lorraine passed, Autumn started calling more. Checking in. She would drive up from Richmond on long weekends, bring food, sit with me on the back porch. Those visits meant everything. Philip came sometimes. He would sit at the kitchen table with his phone and his laptop and work through most of it, but he was there physically, and I try to count that for something. Last Christmas, Autumn called to tell me they were doing a big holiday dinner at their house in Richmond. Her in-laws would be there. Philip's parents, Douglas and Mary Ann, and his sister Candice and her husband. A few of their friends from the neighborhood. She wanted me to come. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I bought a new shirt for the occasion. Nothing fancy, just a clean flannel button-down from Kohl's, navy blue. I got my hair cut at the barber shop on Tuesday. I was ready a week early. The drive from Westerville to Richmond is about 6 hours if you keep a steady pace and stop once for gas and coffee. I left at 7 in the morning on December 23rd. I had a bag of gifts in the back seat. A cashmere cardigan for Autumn that I had been putting away $20 a week since September to afford. A bottle of bourbon for Philip, because I knew he liked it. Some baking things for Mary Ann because Autumn had mentioned she liked to bake. I was about 2 hours out when Autumn called. I answered on the Bluetooth, the way she taught me to do it. Hey Dad. Her voice had a particular kind of careful in it. I've heard that voice before. It is the voice she used when she was 16 and had something to tell me that she did not want to tell me. Hey sweetheart, I'm on I-70, making good time. So Dad, okay, I need to tell you something and I want you to just hear me out first. I turned down the radio. Philip talked to his parents last night and they were expecting something a little more intimate. A little quieter. And Philip thinks it might be better if we do our thing with you separately. Maybe the day after Christmas? Or we could even do New Year's. Make it special. Just the two of us. The road stretched out in front of me, flat and grey and very long. What does that mean, Autumn? It was not a question. She knew it was not a question. It just means his parents are kind of former dad. They like things a certain way, and Philip thinks that having a big mix of people might make it awkward. A big mix. I repeated that. Dad, I'm the only person you're calling to uninvite, aren't I? She was quiet for 3 full seconds. I counted. I didn't want to do this. I need you to know that. Then don't. Dad, it's his family's Christmas too. I have to. You have to what, Autumn? I said her name quiet, not angry, just clear. You have to tell your father not to come to your house for Christmas, because your husband's parents find him inconvenient. That is not what I said. No, but it's what's happening. Another silence. Longer this time. I'm sorry, she said. And she meant it. I could hear that she meant it. That almost made it worse. I told her I understood. I told her to have a good Christmas. I told her I loved her and I would talk to her soon. Then I found the next exit and I pulled off the highway and I sat in a gas station parking lot in Zanesville, Ohio for probably 20 minutes just watching cars go by. Then I turned around and drove home. I did not call anyone. I did not post anything. I went home, put the gifts in the closet, made myself a turkey sandwich and watched the evening news. And then I went to bed. Here is the thing nobody tells you about that kind of moment. It is not the big dramatic feeling you might expect. It is not rage. It is something quieter and heavier. A kind of settling, like when a house foundation shifts, and suddenly a door that used to open easy will not quite close right anymore. I lay there thinking about Lorraine, thinking about how she would have handled this. Lorraine had a spine made of iron, wrapped in velvet. She was gracious and warm, and she would give you the last thing in her refrigerator, but you did not cross her family. You did not cross her husband. She would have driven to Richmond herself, and I would have had to talk her down from the steps. I smile at that, alone in the dark. Christmas morning, I woke up and made coffee and called my brother, Eugene, who lives in Dayton. He came over with his wife Janet and their youngest, who is 22 and still thinks I am interesting because I let him drive the bus one time on an empty lot when he was 12. We ordered Chinese food because nobody felt like cooking, and we sat around my kitchen table and talked until 9 o'clock at night. It was a good day, a genuinely good day. Autumn called in the evening. She sounded tired. She sounded like someone who had spent the day managing things. She asked how I was doing, and I told her the truth. That Eugene came over, that we had a good time, that I was okay. She started to say something about how we would get together soon, and I said, "We will, sweetheart, Merry Christmas," and I meant that kindly, but I hung up knowing something between us had shifted and that she knew it too. January came and went. We talked on the phone, short calls. She did not bring up Richmond. Neither did I. In February, she called on a Sunday evening, and she was crying before she even got through hello. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I am so sorry." I sat down in the kitchen chair. "Talk to me," I said. And she did. For almost an hour. She told me about the Christmas dinner, how Philip's mother, Mary Ann, had spent the evening making small comments about the neighborhood, about her hospital, about the fact that Autumn had not gone back to school for her nurse practitioner yet. She told me how after the guests left, and Philip poured himself a bourbon and sat in his chair, she had looked around the room at the good dishes and the cloth napkins and the candles burned down to nothing, and she had felt completely alone in her own home. She told me she had called her best friend from nursing school, a woman named Diane who lives in Pittsburgh, and Diane had said to her, bluntly and with love, "Autumn, your dad drove 6 hours for you and you sent him home." That landed. She had been carrying it ever since. "I chose him over you," she said. "I chose what was easier for him, and you were alone on Christmas because of me." I let her say all of it. I did not rush her. I did not offer comfort too quickly, because sometimes comfort offered too fast is just another way of moving past a thing before it has been fully felt. When she was quiet, I said, You want to know what I thought about when I was driving home that day? What? I thought about the first time you lost a tooth. You were 6. You swallowed it by accident. And you were devastated because you thought the tooth fairy wouldn't come. And your mother wrote a little letter, signed it from the tooth fairy, explaining that she had a special tracking system for swallowed teeth. You believed that completely. You were so relieved. Autumn was quiet. I kept that letter, I said. Your mother kept everything. It's in a box in the bedroom. I found it after she passed. Dad, I am not telling you that to make you feel worse. I'm telling you because that is what I think about. I think about you at 6 years old, devastated over a tooth. And I think about how there is not a thing in this world I would not have done to fix that for you. That is still true. It will always be true. And I need you to know that the love goes that direction. It does not require anything back. Okay? It just is. She was crying again. But, I said, and I let that word sit for a moment, I also need you to know that I am not a thing to be managed. I am your father. I drove that bus in the snow for 31 years so you could grow up in a warm house with food on the table and new shoes every school year. I am not something to be hidden or rescheduled because someone's parents want a quieter room. I know, she said. I know, Dad. I know. All right, then we understand each other. We talked for another half hour after that. About nothing heavy. About Eugene's knee surgery coming up in March. About a show she had been watching that I might like. When we hung up, I felt something ease a little in my chest. Not all the way, but some. In March, she called and asked if she could come up for a weekend. Just her. She wanted to make me dinner at the house. I said yes. She came on a Friday night. She brought groceries and made pot roast in the slow cooker, the way Lorraine used to make it, from a recipe I had sent her years ago. She set the table with the good place mats, the ones Lorraine had kept in the drawer by the stove. She did not have to do any of that. We ate together at the kitchen table, and we talked like we used to, about real things, about our patients at the hospital, about a little boy she had taken care of who reminded her of a story I used to tell about a kid on my bus route named Jerome, who had drawn a portrait of me with a very large head and presented it to me formally like it was a gallery piece. We laughed until my eyes watered. After dinner, she washed the dishes even though I told her not to. She put the leftovers in containers and labeled them in the refrigerator. Then she came and sat across from me in the living room. I told Philip I need him to do better, she said. I told him that you are my family, and that how he treats you is not something I'm willing to negotiate. How did that go? He didn't like hearing it. She folded her hands in her lap. She has her mother's hands. But I hope, he understood. He's not a bad person, Dad. He just grew up in a world where certain things were valued and certain things weren't, and nobody ever pushed back on that. I know he's not a bad person, I said. And that was true. Philip is not bad. He is limited in the particular way that people are limited when they have never been required to see past the edges of their own experience. That is correctable if someone loves you enough to require it of you. I told him I want you at Easter, she said. And he said okay. I nodded. Good, I said. I'll bring the deviled eggs. She laughed. And there it was, that laugh, the one I have known since she was 3 years old and thought everything was worth laughing at. Easter came. I drove down to Richmond on a Saturday morning. The house was decorated. Tulips on the table, a wreath on the door. Marianne and Douglas were not there this time. It was Autumn and Philip, and a couple of their friends from the neighborhood, a pair of teachers named Marcus and Fiona, who were easy and warm and did not make me feel like a specimen. Philip shook my hand at the door and looked me in the eye and said it was good to have me there. I believed him, not entirely, but enough to sit down at the table and pass the rolls and tell a story about the worst weather I ever drove in, a February whiteout in 2011 where I navigated by memory for 4 blocks because I could not see 10 feet ahead, and I got every single kid home safe. Marcus said, "Man, I'd like to see one of those Wall Street guys do that." I laughed. Philip laughed too after a beat. We ate for 2 hours. Autumn sat next to me and kept touching my arm the way she used to when she was small and wanted to make sure I was still there. I was there. I am still here. That is the gift of stubbornness and a strong heart, and 31 years of getting up before the sun. After dinner, when Philip was in the kitchen helping clear up, Autumn walked me out to the car. The evening had gone golden and cool, the way April evenings in Virginia do. She hugged me for a long time at the car door. "I love you, Dad," she said into my shoulder. "I love you too, baby girl." I drove home with the windows cracked and the radio on, just above a murmur. 6 hours of highway and exit signs, and the particular peace that comes when something broken has started, slowly, to set right. I thought about Lorraine the whole way home. I thought about what she would have said when I walked in the door. She would have been sitting up, probably with a cup of tea, and she would have looked at me over the rim of the mug and said, "Well?" And I would have said, "Well." And she would have nodded like that told her everything, and it would have. I do not need a seat at a fancy table to know my worth. I learned that a long time ago, from a woman who saw exactly who I was the day she met me, a man who drove a bus and fixed things and showed up, and decided that was more than enough. She was right. It was. I have been driving the same roads for 31 years. Same turns, same stops, same kids climbing on with their backpacks and their sleepy faces. And in all that time, the one thing I learned, the one thing the road teaches you if you pay attention, is that what you put out into the world has a way of coming back around. Not always fast, not always clean, but it comes. Autumn did not set out to hurt me. I know that. She is her mother's daughter. She has a good heart, and good hearts sometimes make the wrong choice when they are caught between two pressures and do not yet know their own strength. What she did on that December morning cost her something too. I could hear it in her voice. And the fact that she could not let it rest, that it sat on her chest for weeks until she finally called me crying on a Sunday night, that is not weakness. That is her conscience doing exactly what a conscience is supposed to do. That is character asserting itself even when it is uncomfortable. There is something I want to say about that, because I think it matters. The people who raised me, and I mean the ones who shaped me, not just the ones who fed me, they always said that who you are shows up most clearly not in the easy moments, but in the ones that cost you something. Autumn calling me that February night cost her pride. It cost her the comfortable version of herself that had been trying to keep everyone happy. And she did it anyway. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Philip is not a villain in this story. I want to be clear about that. He is a man who grew up in a world with a particular set of rules, and those rules were never challenged, so he never had reason to question them. That is not evil. That is a gap in understanding, in empathy, in the ability to see that a man's worth is not his title or his tax bracket. Gaps can be filled if someone who loves you is willing to hold the mirror steady. Autumn did that, and to his credit, he sat still long enough to look. What I know, sitting here on the other side of it, is this: I did not lose anything by turning that car around in Zanesville. I did not shrink. I did not disappear. I went home. I called my brother. I ate Chinese food at my kitchen table, and I woke up the next morning the same man I was the day before. A man who shows up, who endures, who does not require anyone's validation to know what he is made of. That steadiness, the kind that does not crack when someone tries to make you feel small, that is the only thing I know how to call real strength. You don't perform it, you don't announce it, you just keep going. And eventually, the people who matter figure out what they almost let go. Lorraine used to say, "Norman, you don't have to prove anything to anybody. Just be exactly who you are, consistently, and let that be enough." I argued with her about it once, back when I was younger and still cared too much about being seen. She just looked at me over her coffee cup and said, "You'll understand eventually." She was right. I understand now. What happened between Autumn and me this past year was not just a family disagreement patched up over pot roast and good conversation. It was something deeper. A daughter finding the clarity to choose right over comfortable, and a father holding the door open long enough for her to find her way back through. Neither of those things happens by accident. They happen because of choices made quietly one at a time, over many years. They happened because somebody, somewhere, decided that love and honesty and the willingness to be accountable were worth more than keeping the peace. That Easter dinner table with its tulips and its easy laughter and Philip actually looking me in the eye, that did not come from nowhere. It came from Autumn's courage and from my refusal to pretend that being dismissed was the same as being nothing. Both of those things had to be true at the same time for the story to end the way it did. I am 63 years old. I have buried a wife and outlasted grief and driven a school bus through a whiteout blizzard by memory. I do not need a seat at a fancy table. But I will tell you, it sure is something to sit at your daughter's table on an Easter evening in Virginia, watching the light go golden through the windows, and know that you earned your place there honestly, and so did she.